I'm going to talk a little bit about how to set up a project in Touch Designer and how to get the outputs to different windows. So there's three ways of doing this. So I'll go through each one individually and explain the benefits and the cons of those different systems. So I'm going to start up Touch. I'm going to open up the default sample project, and I'm just going to close the palette on the left hand side because we don't really need it. So hopefully, and I'm just going to check OBS here to make sure we are getting the absolute in this little top left corner, which is somewhere around here, we should be able to see my second monitor output. So to begin with, I'll just explain how the project is set up in Touch Designer. So Touch Designer, by default, if I click on the home icon here, I'm going to go to the root, and we have three different operators here. They're all components. The first component is project 1. This is a container component, and this is where our project usually lives. So by default, we go inside this by double clicking, and we can see there our project lives inside. So if I hit home again, we then have this perform component. This is a window component, and you can actually create one of those by going to comp window, and you can see there this one's called window 1, but they've just been renamed to perform. So that's actually our main window component. This is the perform mode window component. We then have this local component which houses a load of internal Touch Designer stuff that we don't really need to worry about. Touch Designer is just going to handle that for us. So we don't really need to worry too much about what's going on in here. So the reason we can see these jelly beans is because this container, which is the project, has a background top set to ./out1, which means it's gone inside and it's found the out1 top. So that's this top here. So the out1 top is basically sending up a level and becoming the background of this this component. So the reason that this then gets passed on to the perform component is because the perform component has a window operator set to project 1. So actually, if I get rid of project 1 from there, you'll see that actually now our perform window is not linking to project 1 anymore. But then if we type it in, so we can say project 1, the container is going to go to the perform top. That's perform comp, sorry. There's also, you can see that the opening size on this perform comp is set to automatic from comp top. And what this means is that it's going to get its size from the size of this container, which is 1280 by 720. So if I went into perform mode, which is this top left button here, or F1, then you can see that we have a 1280 by 720 window with our jelly beans in, because that's what the perform comp is seeing. If I hit escape, we'll go back to the network. So this is set to 1280 by 720. What's interesting is that if I have in here if I fit this to a different resolution, so I'm going to set this to 1920 by 1080, which is the resolution of my monitor, and I come back up a level and I go F1 to go into perform mode, you'll see that it's still 1280 by 720 because it's not using the resolution from the tops. It's using the resolution from this component. Now, if I was in the perform mode and I said project 1 /out1, now I'm linking a top to this window component. So now when I hit perform mode, then you'll see that it's now at 1920 1080, and it's still got the borders on the decoration of the window because I've got this borders set to on. If I turn this off and set it to always on top, then now when I hit F1, we just get a full screen window of our jelly beans. We can also set this to go to another monitor by saying monitor. Up here it says justify and offset to specify monitor. So we could say monitor 1, and then we could open up into perform mode, and you'll see that there's nothing on here now and that my output is just on my second monitor. Now, that means that we can't edit our network. If we wanted to open our window and edit our network at the same time, we could go down to the bottom and say open as separate window, and we could click this, and that will now mean that we've got our network here, but then on our second output we have our jelly beans, and as we update things in real time without using delete motion, As I lay down a level, I can change the black level, for example, and you can see there it's updating in real time on the window on the output. So the perform comp is a window comp. So what this means is that if I wanted to, I could have two of these windows. So I could say, for my first output, I'm just going to bring a movie file in, and I'm just going to make sure that movie file in is fitted to 1920 by 1080, which is the resolution of my output. And I'm just going to drag that onto window 1, fill location, borders off. It could actually be automatic from comp top, sorry. And then if I did that, I'll do this differently actually. What I can do is I can actually drag this on to the window operator and say fill location, which means it'll fill to the monitor. So if I do that, then I can say fill, and then I'm just going to set the width to 920 1080, and then when I hit open in separate window, you'll see now that I've got my banana on one screen and my jelly beans on another. So this is a fine way of working. You can work with a window comp set like that, or I could say open in perform mode, and now I'm actually in perform mode, but I have two windows. The issue with that is that two windows they cause more overhead than one. So ideally we want to stick with just one window in touch. We don't want to have multiple windows, and to be honest, you really don't want to be in the network editor during a performance. I mean, this is kind of a personal opinion of mine, but I think other people would probably agree in some of the bigger companies that we never use the network in a show. And the reason being is that you could quite easily accidentally pause your show. You could quite easily accidentally plug a node into the wrong one operator into the other operator and crash the system. So ideally you would build a control panel in a container, and then you would use that control panel to run your show, and you would go into perform mode with one big window. So I'm just going to show how we could set that up. So what I'm going to do is, let's say we want to control this jelly bean scene. So we have the jelly beans set up. We have a window up here, perform mode window. I'm actually going to ignore the perform mode window. This is going to be obsolete, and the reason I'm going to do that is just to show how to set it up from scratch. So I'm going to create a new window component. It's going to be called window 1. It's going to be inside project 1, that's fine. It's going to have a window operator, so the operator we're going to look at is going to be a new container. So I'm basically setting up the project from scratch. And in fact, actually, to do it properly, what I'll do is I'll do it from the top level. So I'm going to create a new container, and I'm going to control that container project. So this is our project. This project we're going to set to be the bounds of both our displays, because we want to show this container across both our displays, across our entire output. So our entire output at the moment is the bounds of the screens. So how do we get the bounds of the screens? Well, we can go inside and we can lay down a monitor's DAT. And what a monitor's DAT allows us to do, if we turn on the bounds toggle, is to see what our bounds actually are. So we can see here we have left, right, bottom, but the most importantly we have a width and a height, and you can see that the width and the height is not 3840 by 1080 as you would expect, but it's actually 3840 by 1083. And the reason for that is that Windows is really bad at snapping these outputs to the same level. I'm going to try snapping again and see if it updates. It's still 1083. It's not correct. Let me just double check. If this was set up something else, if I had my monitor set up something like this, where it's definitely not linked up, then actually now we've got minus 549 pixels. So our bounds are actually 3840 by 1629. So I have a little bit of a rule where I say my project should be the bounds. And in order to do that, I need to set up this as an expression. The expression will be, we're going to find an operator. We're going to go inside the container project, which is /, and then we're going to select the operator we want, which is monitors 1. I'm just going to drag this out so we can see this better. And actually I'm going to drag it down because I'm probably looking over the window. So we've got op./monitors 1. We then need to get the row and the column. So the row is going to be bounds. because that's what we're after. We're after the bounds. And the column is going to be, at the moment we're doing width, so we're going to get the width. And then when I close that off, we'll see that we get a width of 3840 because it's pulling from here. We then need a height. So when I open up the height, I'm just going to copy and paste the same script. And this time I'm going to say, instead of width, I'm going to say height. So that now sets our output, our project, to show across the entire set of screens that we have. So if I set a background color of something like yellow, and then I go into perform mode, well, the problem is I can't go into perform mode right now because I don't have my window. I can, but it will show up across all of the displays. So what I'm going to do now is create that window. So let's create a new window. So the window is going to go across all of our screens. And in order to do that, what we need to do is we drag the container project up to the window operator. So now the window is seeing our project. We can set it to justify to one monitor, but we're not using one monitor, we're using multiple monitors. So what I'm going to do is set it to the bounds of all monitors. And what this means is that it's going to go, this window is going to stretch across all of our monitors together. When doing this, it's also good to say opening size. I normally set to fill. I normally turn my borders off. I say always on top, which is quite good because it means it won't show the start bar or something on top. And now I can say I need to open it as a perform window. Now, the problem is it's not our perform window right now. If I go to dialogues, window placement, our perform window is actually set to window 1 because it's our only window in the network. If I had another window, you can see that I can actually choose which one is the perform window here. I can also choose whether I want to start in perform mode, which is quite handy, so when I start the file up next time, it'll automatically go up into full screen. So we can do that, or we can click on the window and then just click set as perform window. So now if I open that up, we'll see that everything is yellow, as it should be, across all of my monitors. So that's all very good. So that's now, we've got a canvas that stretches across everything. So what I'm going to do is just set the background color back to black. So now we need to decide on how we output our different screens. So let's say I'm going to put the banana on this screen, and then on my other screen I'm going to put the nature scene from the samples folder. So the best way of organizing how these feeds, because they're essentially feeds, would fit onto this screen is by using containers. So I'm going to create a container. I'm going to call this container left screen. Oops, screen, not screen. And I'm going to make another, I'm going to copy and paste that container and call this one right screen. So in my setup, my left screen is 1920 by 1080. So I'm going to set the width and the height to 1920 by 1080. And in my right screen is the same. So that's all very good. So my width and height is 1080, and then my X position is 0 and 0. So if I had a perfect setup, then I'd probably just set right screen to be 1920 wide and give it a background color. I'll set a background top, but this now would show on the right screen and this would show on the left screen. But the problem is that we don't live in a perfect world because Windows hates us and wants to have everything set to some weird value down at the bottom here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my banana to be the background of this. So my banana is there. I can go look. I can say background top / movie file in 1, and I now have a banana on this container. For my right screen, I can now set another movie file in, and this one's going to be the nature scene. I don't know, nature 1, whichever one you want. They're all 1280 by 720. So if I go into here, I can say okay / movie file in 1, and now I've got a screen to go to my full output. In fact, I'll replace the banana with one of those as well, because then we can see, where the bounds of those screens are. So right now, when I come back up a level, you can see here that I now have 2 windows on my monitor setup, and they're looking pretty good. They're stretching across both. But if I go into perform mode, you can see here that actually one of them looks great, but one of them looks really bad and it's not in the right place. And the reason that's not in the right place is because my stupid monitor setup in Windows states that minus 540 is here, therefore this needs to go up 540 pixels. So one option we can do is just look at the monitor bounds and say, this is minus 549. So I could just type 549 in here. And what that will do when I go to full screen mode is it will now fit that into the correct place. But let's say our monitor setup changes. If I then go, oh, you know what, actually it's not 540, it's now less. Now when I go into perform mode, it won't work again. It's broken already. So what we can do in order to alleviate that is we can use an expression in the X and Y parameters there. And the way we do that is, first of all, we decide which one we're putting on which output. So I'm going to say monitor 1 is going to have an X. Well, the X is already there, so I just say op monitor z1, and I want to get the well, I'm just going to use, this is going to be monitor 1, well, 1 in the row is 1, so it's this row here, and then I'm going to say I want to get the left coordinate. So I say left, and that will give us 0, because it is 0. And then I'm going to say monitors 1, and I'm going to say this is going to be the right window, and that will give us, not right, sorry, I'm being an idiot, bottom. And bottom will give us 0 as well, because it's 0, 0. So the bottom left coordinate is 0, 0. So that's where it's going to live. So that is all good for display 0. Now, that doesn't work for display 2, because display 2 has a different bottom coordinate. And the problem with display 2 is that the bottom coordinate is minus 290, but we can see from this that actually it wants to be 290, not minus 290. So what we need to do is we need to get the bounds bottom and subtract the display from it. So at the moment, this left screen, when I go into perform mode again, you can see it's still wrong, because the bottom here is actually the inverse of what we want. We want to get the bounds subtracted by the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to make the expression. This is going to be monitors 1, and it's not going to be 1, it's going to be the bounds. And we want to get the bounds bottom parameter, parameter in there, subtracted by the monitors bottom. Or it might be the other way around, sorry, I think I've got that the wrong way around. Let me just check that. Yeah, sorry, I've got that wrong. It's the monitor's bottom subtracted by the bounds. And this now will give us the right position in Y. So this expression here, we could copy. And then we can also put that into the X parameter. Because it might be, at the moment we only have a problem with Y, but it could have a problem with X as well. So I'm just going to say left minus bounds left. And now that will always show up in the right place for that monitor. And we have to do the same thing for monitor 2 as well. So for monitor 2, I'm going to say this is actually not going to be 1, this is the second monitor, so I'm going to say monitors 2, and in here the bounds again is fine, and then I can do the same thing for the bottom. Sorry, this is left, this is bottom. And then that's going to put that in the right position. And we can go a step further as well. We can actually say, you know what, why don't we just set the width to be the actual width of that monitor? So if I was going to copy, that monitor, I may as well just set the width as well, and the height. And then we know that whatever we put into this container will always fit to that particular monitor, that particular output. And sometimes we don't even want to do this. Sometimes we want to stretch across the whole bounds anyway, so we can do that. We can just put the bounds coordinates in, and it'll stretch across the whole thing. But in the case of having different outputs on different displays, then we want to do something like this. And so now when I go up to the top level, you can see here, container project, we have this weird setup where one monitor is nowhere near the same setup as the other. And when I go into perform mode, everything now looks great. If I then go change windows around and hit apply, and then go back in. You can see here it's changed, it's updated because we scripted it to update. And then when I hit perform mode again, everything looks fantastic again. So that's kind of how you set it up. And if you have multiple monitors, you have like 4 monitors, it's exactly the same. There's no difference. It's just take the monitor, subtract the bounds from that particular coordinate, whether it's X, Y, width, height, or left and right, as they call it, left, right, bottom, top. Then you can set that all up, and it should all just work. So that's how that all works. If you want to see an example of this in practice, then I can just go into SimpleMixer here. So SimpleMixer has a this already set up, ready to go. So if you want to have a little look at how it works, you can pull apart this file. SimpleMixer is a little bit more complicated in some ways. I will just upload this file. There you go. So SimpleMixer has, if I go, you can see it's opened up in the correct way. If I hit home and then go inside, you can see for SimpleMixer it has the container output here, which has a load of expressions which are to show that. These are the monitor stats, they're all there. I've actually split it out in SimpleMixer so it's easier to pull the monitors that you want. And then there's a container GUI here that actually always uses the primary monitor, so you can get the primary monitor from that as well. So yeah, that's it. If you have any questions, throw them in the comments section, and I'm also on the Touch Designer Discord, so if you want to ask anything on there, I'll be around on there as well. Just at my name, Richard Burns, and I can probably help out in that sense as well. So yeah, that's it, and I hope you enjoyed.